This is Lab 9. There's only 2 more labs. Lab 9, Lab 10 next week will cover the respiratory and the urinary systems, and we'll be dissecting kidneys. 2 weeks from today we'll be in the reproductive systems, male and female. Then we'll go away for Thanksgiving, and then when we come back from Thanksgiving, we'll have the lab exam. Your lab exam will cover labs 6 through 11, nervous system, digestive system, 2 on the cardiovascular system. That's kind of where we are now. So we're really, this is the 4th out of 6 labs, right? 4th out of 6 labs on the final exam. There's still 2 more to go. And that lab exam will be very similar to what we've already done. It'll be 102 questions, 34 stations, 3 questions per station, 2 minutes and 40 seconds per station. So it's going to be formatted exactly the same. There will not be sheep eyes, there will not be sheep brains, but there will be fetal pigs. And you will see your fetal pigs again in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks, we will be dissecting what's called a pluck. It's what they pluck out of the animal. It is the lung and the trachea and the heart. And so we'll be dissecting full-size heart, full-size lung. And that'll be a lot of fun. It'll really help solidify this whole cardiovascular flow of blood through the heart. You'll see the chordae tendineae. You'll see how thick the wall of the heart is. You'll also see, for example, how muscular the aorta is. And you'll get to compare arteries and veins a little bit as well. And then that day, we'll also, in addition to doing the reproductive systems, look at your fetal pigs again. And when you look at your fetal pigs again, we've already done the digestive organs. The second time around, we'll review that very quickly, but then we'll also look at them for the first time for their little kidneys and their little heart and their little lungs. And we'll see some of their arteries and veins. Things that we have not yet appreciated, we'll then be able to appreciate when we see them a second time. So on the practical, there will be 4 pigs. 4 fetal pigs, and we'll be labeling some very major structures, and we'll get into that later on. So that's what we have left, right? There's only 2 more labs, 2 more pre-labs, and then, like I said, don't throw anything away at all. Today we have really 3 objectives. Number 1, remember that about 2 weeks ago we had, quote, an endocrine lab. It wasn't very intensive, but we did ask you to know the structures of the, where are those endocrine hormone secreting glands, and you know where the thymus and the thyroid and the pituitary are as a result. Today, similar, we're going to look at where the lymphatic organs are. And part of your take-home exam is going to include the lymphatic system. So I know Mr. Matoni's and my take-home exam, both of us, we include the lymphatic structures on there. Also some digestive system, which you've seen in the lab. And a little bit on the special senses, the eye and the ear, you've seen that here as well. And a little bit on the endocrine system. So a little bit of what you've been seeing, and pieces and parts are being asked of you on the take-home exam. We'll also today be looking at blood vessels, arteries and veins. We know that the blood leaves out the aorta, but then what? What happens next? And we know that blood comes back through the inferior and superior vena cava, but what happened in between? So today we'll be talking about arteries and veins and labeling and learning many of those structures. The good news is arteries and veins name themselves, and you already know most of their names. So you're not going to struggle with that at all. Okay, there's just a couple of words that are maybe new to you. The rest of them, you're going to say, oh, femoral vein, it must be along the femur. Brachial artery, it must be in the arm. So you're not going to struggle at all with these terms. So the very first thing I'm going to do is just give you a very brief overview of the lymphatic system. This is not at all comprehensive. It's just to get you oriented just a little bit. Now, the lymphatic system is something that you will learn a lot more about if you take, for example, an immunology class or take a microbiology class here. And within that microbiology class, you will learn about how our body fights off bacteria and fights off viruses. And in that conversation, you will learn a lot about the immune system and the lymphatic system. Okay, so that's coming your way if you take that class. Or you'll pick it up in other classes along the way. For now, what I want you to realize is that the lymphatic system and the cardiovascular system are working together. The cardiovascular system is pumping blood. And the liquidy portion of your blood we call plasma. That much we know. Well, there's a fluid that's also percolating between your tissues and between the cells of your tissues. And that is your lymph. Or the other word for that is the interstitial fluid. So you'll see interstitial fluid or lymph. They're both the same thing. That fluid is, like I said, percolating between the cells of your body, but it's also traveling through lymphatic vessels. As that fluid is passing through lymphatic vessels, it is going to go along these structures called lymph nodes. Lymph nodes are filled with cells which are able to attack and destroy foreign things. So it's part of your ability to fight off disease. So we'll see that even cancer cells, your body is constantly making cancer cells, and most of them, thankfully, get checked and destroyed as part of our normal immune response. It's just that occasional cell that gets through the lymphatic system and then sets up shop that causes the cancers that we are worried about. Now, there are some lymphatic structures, organs, that we'll be looking at, like lymph nodes, and your tonsils, and the spleen, and the lymph vessels themselves. There aren't that many. This will not be a real difficult thing for you. And I want you to realize that without your lymphatic system and its ability to fight off disease and help maintain our homeostasis, we would not live very long. Right? We really absolutely depend upon this system to survive. When you take micro, you will at first maybe be grossed out by the number of bacteria that are in and on us. In fact, we are only about 10% human. We're about 90% bacterial. We have 10 times more bacteria on us than we do human cells. So we as an individual are actually a biome to ourselves. So we have 10 times more bacterial cells living in our gut and on our skin, like I said, than we do actual human cells. And we would live for only a few moments if it wasn't for our ability to fight off all those cells that are living with us. Now, the lymphatic system, not only is it helping to maintain your immune system, but it's also helping with your fluid balance. You have about 3 liters of this interstitial fluid in your body. It's well maintained, it's balanced within your lymphatic vessels and back and forth between your cardiovascular system. But if that balance should become disrupted, you may be complaining of edema of some sort, swelling, fluid accumulation. And that fluid can come out of your blood, basically, out of your tissues and accumulate, maybe around your lungs or around your heart or in your ankles. If you have puffy ankles, again, that's a little bit of an imbalance between your cardiovascular and your lymphatic structures. Finally, your lymphatic system is also absorbing the fats from your diet. The fats that you consume in your diet are, I think of it, too big to absorb across your small intestine and into your bloodstream. And instead, you have lymphatic structures along your small intestine called lacteals. And it's into those lacteals that the fats are absorbed. And then those fats rejoin with your general circulation. So those dietary fats get into your body, but they come a different route than your proteins or your sugars. So they come as a part through the lymphatic system. So pretty important stuff. Now, your lymphatic organs are going to house special cells called lymphocytes. That makes sense. Cells of the lymphatic structure. So lymphocytes. And lymphocytes are one of your white blood cells. Okay, one of your types of white blood cells. We won't be dealing with it very much this semester, but I'll mention it in lecture, and I'm sure Mr. Macauley will as well. And next semester in Biology 106, we'll dive in deeper and understand different white blood cells better. Okay, we'll have a whole lab on blood. So I think I've already said most of this, that your immune response and your lymphatic system are working hand in hand. Now, they're not simultaneous. They're not the same thing. You'll hear it said that your lymphatic system is your immune system. Not completely accurate, because even your skin is part of your immune system, right? Because you're defending and blocking bacteria from getting into your body. So even there are many parts to your, quote, immune system. The lymphatic system makes up a big part of that. Now, like I said, your lymphatic structures have lymphocytes within them. Some of these lymphocytes are called B lymphocytes. You may have heard them as B cells, or T lymphocytes, or T cells. Now, these cells all have different jobs. The B cells, the B lymphocytes, are the cells in your body making antibodies. So when we discuss blood typing and the fact that your body is producing antibodies, the cells producing those antibodies are your B cells, some of your lymphocytes. And then there are T cells. T cells are, some of them can actually directly attack foreign bacteria or viruses or cancer cells in your body. So you got B cells and T cells and lots of subdivisions thereof. You'll hear in the news, we hear about this, unfortunately, that people with HIV and full-blown AIDS, one of the things, what kills them is that their T cell, one of their types of T cells gets destroyed. Immunosuppressive, right? We autoimmune, we destroy these cells, and now those individuals can't fight off a normal infection. So they die of infections typically that would not kill you and me because our immune system is intact. So they lose their immune system and they die of things that they wouldn't normally die of. Some of these other lymphocytes are memory cells. Why do we get vaccinated? Right? We get vaccinated so that our body has been introduced to something foreign so that it maintains a memory of that experience. And then if we are introduced to that foreign body again, our body already has the equipment to back it up and fight off that infection very efficiently. Some of these boosters need to be done every 5 years, some every 10 years, right? That's why you have to get your tetanus shot every few years. Other things are lifelong immunity because you have these memory cells that stay with you. They stay with you and keep making antibodies and keep responding to, throughout your lifespan, the possibility of being infected with that particular agent. That's just an overview, just a big idea of what this lymphatic system is and some of the pieces and parts of it. What I need you to know for next week and for the lab practical are the location of the lymphatic organs. Not that difficult. If you would please turn to page 492 in your Big Amerman book, there you will find an image that looks much like this slide. So your job is to basically know where these lymphatic organs are. We don't have a good model of, quote, the lymphatic system. So I will depend upon an image like this for you to label these different organs. So the first thing we notice when we see this image, and you saw this in week 1, right, lecture 1, the different body systems. And you may remember my saying that green structures are typically lymphatic structures. So here you see what looks like green nerves or green blood vessels. No, those are lymphatic vessels. So green is our color that we see on this image mostly. So all those vessels traveling through are, quote, lymphatic vessels. They are carrying this lymph, this fluid. Now this fluid will pass by lymph nodes. So all over this image, if you look closely, you will see little nodules, right? Little lymph nodes. Those little lymph nodes contain within them lymphocytes, which are available to attack and destroy and get rid of foreign things as part of your immune response. So we have these lymph nodes all over along the lymphatic vessels. There are 3 places in the body, actually 4 places in the body, where you find a higher concentration of these lymph nodes. They're everywhere, but you're going to find a lot of them in what's called the inguinal region. Okay, so there's a lot of lymph nodes there. There are a lot of lymph nodes also lining your intestines. There are a lot of lymph nodes in your armpit region called the axillary lymph nodes. And there are a lot of lymph nodes in the cervical region, the neck. Now, 3 of those 4 places make total good sense to me as to why there would be a lot of them. Why would you expect a lot of lymph nodes in the cervical region? Yeah, you're breathing in pathogens and you're eating, right? So all those foreign things are coming in. You want to have an extra special number of fighting abilities in that area. Makes sense. How about why would there be a lot of lymphatic activity in the gut? Same thing, right? That's an opportunity as you're eating. Bacteria, viruses could be a part of what you're consuming. So it makes sense that your intestines have a fair number of lymphatic structures along the way. Lastly, in the inguinal region, that one also makes sense, right? The urethra and the vagina make great places for things to enter into the body. So check, check, check. No problem. I got it figured out. The one that's a little bit less obvious to me are the axillary lymph nodes. Why do we have an extra number of lymph nodes here? And the only reason that comes up to me, and I think it's real, but it doesn't follow quite as logically, is that at least in the female, the breast is, if milk can come out, something can go in. So it is a place of potential attack. So that's the only way I can remember that the axillary region would also have an opportunity or the reasoning for more of these lymph nodes.
Well, you also got to figure that's where you sweat a lot and stuff like
You do, but nothing's coming in, right? It's true, right? You sweat a lot, but there's nothing coming in there. I sweat from the bottom of my feet too, right? So I don't think it's so much that things are leaving. It's just places where things could come into the body. But where do we hear about axillary lymph nodes? Unfortunately, breast cancer. Now, you'll hear about lymph nodes with any kind of cancer, but I think breast cancer has become commonplace. We talk about it more freely than other cancers. So a person who has breast cancer, they'll go in and they'll do a biopsy. Right? And not only will they usually biopsy the tumor itself within the breast, but they'll usually go to the nearby lymph nodes, and they'll also biopsy those lymph nodes. Now, what are they looking for? They're looking to see if the cancer has spread to the lymph nodes. Cancer just loves to wander through these lymphatic vessels to the lymph nodes. Now, they do enough of these biopsies to statistically assure themselves. So if I test the biopsy, if I test the lymph nodes and I don't see any cancer, again, this is a statistical kind of game, but if I don't see any cancer in the lymph nodes, I'm going to assume what? That it has not spread, and that the tumor is still intact, has not metastasized. So my treatment options would probably include surgical removal and maybe some radiation. If I see that there are lymph nodes involved, then I know that the tumor has spread. If it has spread to the nearby lymph nodes, I don't know how far it's gone. I have to go chasing after it with chemo agents, right? Chemotherapy. So I have to assume it's spread everywhere and go chasing systemically through the whole body. Okay? So that's where we hear about it. Now, it doesn't matter what kind of cancer there is. Breast, they look at the axillary lymph nodes. If you have liver cancer or pancreatic cancer, they're going to be looking at the nearby lymph nodes as well. Same idea, if it has spread or not. Okay, but we hear about those axillary lymph nodes in breast cancer because they are the ones that they look at. Okay, make sense? Now, what else is in this picture that you need to know? MALT. That is that special type of lymphatic tissue in the gut. Mucosa-associated lymphatic tissue, MALT, MALT. It's basically lymph node-like material along the gut. We'll just call it that for simple. The thymus. Now, 2 weeks ago, when we looked at the endocrine organs, the thymus was on that list. The thymus does include hormones. It does release hormones. So it is endocrine. Remember I told you then I didn't have a model to show the thymus? I don't have a thymus model now. But the thymus is going to be sitting right on the base of the heart. Okay, right on the top superior border of the heart. In a young person, it's quite large because the thymus is important in the maturation of the immune system. In you and me, it shrinks to something very, very small. Difficult sometimes to even find in a dissection. Tonsils, 2 different types. This picture shows what we think of as the tonsils. Palatine tonsils. Open wide in your oropharynx along the soft palate, you will find the, quote, tonsils. Those are more specifically your palatine tonsils. However, there's another pair. If you look at the bottom of this, the second look at the bottom picture on this page, and you'll see a blow up of the face. And if you look carefully, you'll see another kind of tonsil labeled right in the nasopharynx called the pharyngeal tonsils. They are in your nasopharynx. They are more commonly called your adenoids. Those both make sense, right? Your tonsils, well, the tonsils have a lot of lymphocytes in them, and the adenoids are catching airborne things that come in, back of your nose. Palatine tonsils are catching foodborne things. Now, what happens, though? Kids can have recurrent infections, and those tonsils get really swollen, or the adenoids get swollen, and they become such a nuisance that they'll surgically remove them. Now, why are they swollen? Because they're active. They're helping establish the immune system. 30 years ago, it was more common to take tonsils out than it is now. Nowadays, people are kind of, I think the pendulum has swung, and we don't take them out as quickly as we used to out of an inconvenience. If you've got a cold, right, you feel around your neck, you feel those lymph nodes, they're swollen. Why are they swollen? Because your immune system is highly active. It is definitely trying to fight off the infection. So when your tonsils are swollen or infected, it's because, right, your immune system is ramping up, trying to fight off something. But sometimes kids will have, just chronic infections and chronic problems with their tonsils, and they'll yank them. Now, they still have a lot of the rest of their immune system to make up the difference, but clearly there's something, right? They're losing a little bit of their immune response because they don't have their tonsils anymore. Was that what you were asking about?
No, not the tonsils.
Adenoids, same idea. They're tonsils.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. I was having a sinus surgery this summer, and they were like...
Absolutely. And I had mine 3 times out as a kid. They kept growing back. So they would take out most of it, and apparently mine were so infected, I was getting sick all the time as a kid. I had ear tubes put in, I had tonsils removed, I had adenoids removed 3 times. I was seeing the ENT a lot, right? Ear, nose, and throat issues a lot as a kid. And so they yanked them out, and I remember going to the hospital and getting a lot of ice cream and having a sore throat and having ear surgeries because I was having a lot of ear infections. So my immune system was just really ramped up all the time. I was chronically infected and hoarse, and it was a mess. Yeah, if they're in there, they'll yank them out because they're infected or in the way.
So what about polyps?
Polyps are just are going to be more of a growth, usually a benign growth, right? Not cancerous, but benign. Just like polyps within the intestine, they're benign growths. The problem is polyps, benign growths can become cancerous or can enlarge and become blocking. So we need to watch them. So just keep going back to your doctor and check, right? So you got 2 different kinds of tonsils, palatine and pharyngeal or adenoids. And then lymph nodes, again, everywhere along the way, 4 areas of concentration. And then the spleen also is a lymphatic organ. If you have mono, your spleen gets enlarged. And it's why you don't want an athlete who has mono on the field playing. It's not only are they tired, right? Mono kind of knocks you out, but also your spleen becomes very enlarged. Now, you saw the spleen in the digestive pig, right? On the model, you also saw it in the pig. It was that little flap next to the stomach. That spleen will become quite enlarged. Now, in you and me, the spleen is right up underneath some of the floating ribs. And so if the spleen is enlarged and you get hit from the back, it would be very easy to rupture the spleen. As part of your immune system, the spleen is very vascular. It is receiving a lot of blood. So to rupture or to damage the spleen when it's infected from mono could be a very serious, injury, right? So a person who has mono and has an enlarged spleen, you wouldn't want them doing any contact sports during that active infection. So you hear about kids with mono, no football, no basketball, no soccer because of the enlarged spleen. So that's really what I want you to know. The rest of these slides are just extra information on the lymph nodes, the spleen, things like that. Nothing that I'm going to ask you about next week. I just want you to be able to identify the structures that are on this image and that are on your page there. Everyone okay with that? Okay. The rest of it is just background information, honestly. It's really interesting, but where you just don't have the time to focus in on it. Now, your take-home exam might ask about some things about the lymphatic structures. So I would definitely, when you are doing your take-home exam, I would definitely recommend that you have not only your textbook and your lecture notes with you, but I would also have my Amerman book and my lab notes nearby, because you're going to be asked questions about the eye and the ear, perhaps, and you know where your eye and ear structures are in your Amerman book better than you probably know your textbook. So definitely have all of your resources available to you when you're doing your take-home exam. So a little bit more information here about the spleen, a little bit more about the lymph nodes. So that brings me over to blood vessels. Any concerns right now about lymphatic? Okay. So moving on to the bigger topic of the day, and that is blood vessels. So the nice thing about blood vessels, I've already mentioned this, is that the names of them is not going to be a problem for you. Femoral, brachial, ulnar, radial. I mean, terms you already know. Iliac, in the iliac region. You already know the superior and inferior vena cava. There will be a couple of new terms like jugular and carotid, but overall, you're not going to have any trouble with these. Arteries and veins usually travel side by side. Arteries are typically more protected. They're deeper in the body because arteries are more crucial. If you damage an artery, it's going to be under a lot of pressure. It can squirt. You can hemorrhage out. You can die from cutting an artery. Whereas a vein, not very much pressure. And so the blood, if you cut a vein, it will typically clot off, no problem. So they're going to be named either for the structure that they pass through, like the femoral artery, or the structure to which they supply blood. So like the hepatic artery going to the liver, or the splenic artery going to the spleen, that kind of thing. So again, no problems, I don't think, with naming. Now, your blood vessels are contributing two types of circulation patterns in your body. There's your systemic circulation or your systemic circuit. All the blood vessels involved with bringing and carrying oxygen to all of your systems. This is your big majority of your body. And then there's a more limited set of plumbing going to your lungs. And this is the pulmonary circuit or your pulmonary circulation. And that just deals with blood to and from the heart and lungs. So that's a more limited circulation system. Systemic circulation is worried about bringing oxygen and nutrients and picking up waste products from your body tissues. The pulmonary circuit is more involved with getting your gas, your oxygen, getting your blood, reoxygenated in the lungs. Now, these two sides of your heart are working together. Some individuals, some cardiologists will walk around talking about the right heart and the left heart. Because really what you have are two side-by-side pumps. These two pumps are sitting side by side in your chest. They're working, they're talking to each other, they're interacting with each other, but they really are quite different. Last week you saw how asymmetric the heart was, right? It's really quite asymmetric. One side is more muscular, one side isn't. There's some asymmetry that we'll talk about today with the vessels as well. So based upon what you know, which side of the heart, right or left, do you think pumps more blood every time or every minute? I'm hearing some lefts. Anybody want to oppose that thought? The right, good. Does anyone want to give me the right answer? They're the same. Now, it makes sense. The reason people say left usually at first is because you know that the left side is more muscular, right? The left side has to squeeze really hard to get blood all the way to the brain and to the big toe. The right side only has to squeeze hard enough to get blood over to the lungs. That much we know, kind of, right? But what we don't appreciate yet is that both sides have to be pumping the same volume. Because remember, this is one big closed system. And if we were pumping one side more than the other side, we'd have a backup or an overflow somewhere very quickly. So in fact, even though they're pumping at a different force and under a different blood pressure, they're pumping the same volume. And we'll deal with that conversation a lot next semester in 106. Okay? But it makes sense right now that I say it. They have to be pumping the same volume. Now, there are in diseases people whose heart is beginning to fail, and one side will be stronger than the other. After a heart attack or with heart disease, one side might be much weaker than the other. And what happens is that the two sides do start pumping unevenly, and now there's fluid buildup. It could be fluid buildup in the ankles, or it could be fluid buildup around the lungs or around the heart, making it difficult for people to breathe. And now you're dealing with congestive heart failure. Some issues there where fluid is building up around the lungs while their heart is also failing, congestive heart failure. So again, that happens with diseases, but in you and me, healthy hearts, same. Balanced pumping. Now, there are three different types of blood vessels. You've heard of them. Arteries, by definition, always carry blood away from the heart. No exceptions, definition, no doubt. True, true, always true. Arteries always carry blood away from the heart. Those arteries, as they carry blood away from the heart, are going to branch or bifurcate into smaller and smaller arteries. And we'll be naming about 20 of those arteries today. Eventually, those arteries will go to every single tissue in your body. And we'll get down to really, really microscopic structures. And eventually, the blood will go into capillaries. Capillaries are a special kind of vessel where gas exchange occurs. Oxygen is dropped off. CO2 is picked up. It's also here where nutrients are delivered and waste products are picked up. It's also here where fluid is exchanged between the plasma of the blood and the lymphatic fluids of your tissues. So all that exchange is happening in the capillaries. Then, after the nutrients and oxygen have done their dancing around and exchanging, that blood then returns to the heart through a series of veins. Now those veins are going to start small and get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're going to eventually merge back to the heart. And you know how. From the legs and from the trunk, merging back into the inferior vena cava. Back from the head, the neck, and the arms, back through the superior vena cava, and the veins of the heart drain back into the right atrium through the coronary sinus. Right, so we've seen those three vessels that bring blood back to the right atrium. So again, as arteries get smaller, veins get bigger as they come back. Now there's a term here that I want to introduce to you, and it's an anastomosis. Anastomosis is sort of a generic term. It's used in different places within anatomy. Here it's saying where two or more vessels merge, and that's true, not just of blood vessels though. If you disconnect your intestine and reconnect it to the stomach in another place, we would call that an anastomosis. So where two things come together, two structures come together, that is sometimes called an anastomosis. Now, my verbiage here I think is confusing. So what I want to say is that anastomosis is like an alternative route. Right? That's what I want you to think about right now. And veins tend to have more anastomoses than arteries. In other words, veins have more alternative routes in your body. This is why someone can have veins stripped out of their leg. So if someone's having painful varicose veins, they can have those veins taken out of their leg. Life goes on. And the reason is, okay, if I take that vein out of the leg, guess what? There's another vein that can carry the blood back to the heart. There's another alternative route by which blood can get back to the heart. But if I strip out an artery, arteries don't have many branching options. So if I take an artery out, I'm also probably taking out the one and only way that tissues are going to get their oxygen. So we can't live without arteries, but we can certainly live with fewer veins. Okay? And that idea of alternative routes and anastomoses plays into that. Yes.
That kind of disturbs the arteries and veins. How do they...
Well, remember, yeah, it's a good point, because I know we think that, okay, the blood going to my little finger, right, that blood all goes down to my little finger and all comes back. What we need to appreciate, and this is not easy, is that your arteries are branching off all along the way and feeding tissues all along your arm. So when you have an amputation, like at the elbow, you have cut off the arteries going to the hand, but you've also cut off all the veins coming back. Everything, though, before the amputation still has this blood flow going to that tissue and those microscopic veins coming back. So we are able to maintain that. But I appreciate it, because when you look at the drawings in a picture, it makes you think that it's one long route, and if I somehow amputate from my elbow down, there wouldn't be a way for it to come back. What you have here is just thousands of little exits coming off and entrance ramps coming back on the interstate to these major vessels. So amputating, yeah, it's a big bloody mess, but the circulation is maintained where the body was not amputated. Good thinking though, good thought. Now, blood vessels, you're not surprised, you know they're hollow, they carry blood, so you shouldn't be surprised either that people got together and named the layers. The layers here go by the word tunic. So we're going to say that blood vessels have tunics, layers, coats, coverings. And the first layer on the inside is the tunica intima, also called the tunica interna, the inside layer. Now this layer on the inside of a blood vessel is composed of simple squamous epithelium. You're picturing it, right? One layer, flat cells. This single layer of cells has a nickname called the endothelium. So people will refer to the endothelium, and they're saying to you that is the epithelium within, right? Endo means within the vessel. Very thin layer. The middle layer of a blood vessel is called the tunica media, the middle layer, and this is easy, it's full of muscle. Middle, media, muscle, all M's. This is smooth muscle. You've just finished discussing the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. Right? In lecture. Yes? And you know that your body only has about 5 or so liters of blood, and your body has to make, quote, decisions as to where that blood goes. when you're scared and the bear is chasing you through the woods, where is most of your body is sending most of your blood where? Fight or flight, it's sending your blood to your muscles, heart, right? And it's taking blood away from digestive and urinary. How is that done? Well, it's done by squeezing some vessels smaller and allowing other vessels to dilate open. It's all in the muscle layer. It's all in the tunica media where this regulation of which body system is going to get more blood right now. And then when you're relaxed and you're having your s'mores by the fire, the bear's way in the woods and you're relaxed and you're digesting that hot dog meal, right, from the camping trip, and you're in a parasympathetic, more of a parasympathetic mode, now blood goes away from your muscles and instead is shunted to your stomach for digestion, right? So what's controlling the blood flow to different systems? The muscle within this tunica media.
Is it related to like if you're scared enough that you like wet yourself?
It kind of is, yeah. Yeah, but remember too, when you're scared, you go white, right? You lose color, complexion. Reason is that blood that's normally toward the surface of your skin has been shunted or sent toward your muscles, right? And when you're eating, you get kind of lazy, right? When you're digesting that meal, all that blood's going to your gut. It's why they would say don't swim after you eat. Now that's kind of a wives' tale kind of thing, but don't go out and swim right after you eat, because it is true that more blood has been sent to your stomach. You have a little bit less blood going to your limbs and to your muscles, and I suppose you'd be a little bit more likely to drown. I don't think it's any fact, but that was the thinking, right? Don't go swimming right after you eat, right? But we understand that. We're a little bit lazier, right? We're a little bit foggier. We're kind of kicking back. Our brain's not getting quite as much oxygen. Our muscles aren't getting quite as much oxygen because our body is focusing on sending blood to the digestive system to digest that meal. Okay, so that's the middle layer. Then the outer layer of the vessel is called the tunica externa. You'll see this other term, tunica adventitia, maybe in reading. I won't use it. I'll just talk about tunica externa. This outer layer of the blood vessel is going to be made up of collagen, strength. It's going to have elastic fibers, stretch. These vessels stretch. How do you take your pulse? Right? When you put your fingers up on your neck, you're feeling the blood going through your carotid artery, and you know that those vessels are stretching and recoiling. So clearly your blood vessels are elastic. That elasticity comes from the elastin proteins in the outer layer. That outer layer is also attaching these vessels to body structures. These things are not just wires, or hoses wandering through your body. They are anchored to structures through the body. Lastly, there is a series of small vessels feeding your vessels. Now, this kind of seems counterintuitive. You would think that the blood going through the blood vessel would be itself carrying nutrients to the cells of the blood vessel. Because I think we forget that blood vessels are not hoses, they're not pipes, they're cells, right? The inside is epithelial, the middle layer is muscle, the outside is fibroblasts making collagen and elastin. So those cells need nutrients just like any other cell needs nutrients. So there's a little series of vessels called the vasa vasorum. Vas means vessel. So vas, vessel of the vessels. And the vasa vasorum, I'll show you a picture in a moment, are little blood vessels that bring nutrients to the cells that make up the bigger blood vessel. Okay, so hold on to that thought and you'll see the picture. As you go through this little unit, I want you comparing and contrasting arteries and veins. An artery and a vein, traveling side by side, look on the outside about the same diameter. They're about the same, right? Diameter-wise, from the outside, an artery and a vein are pretty much similar. The difference is this. The artery is going to have a thicker tunica media. Why would an artery need a thicker tunica media? Because arteries are under a lot of pressure, aren't they? It'd be just like if you have, you go to Lowe's and you buy a hose, and there's cheap, medium, and good hoses. And what makes a cheap hose different from a good hose is how thick the wall is. Because a cheap hose will break and the wall will break and it'll crack. You want a good, thick, muscular artery to withstand that pressure and not crack. Because the last thing you want is an aneurysm or a crack in your arteries. That's called death. right? So we don't want that. So we want good, thick, muscular arteries. Now veins, in comparison, have very wimpy walls of muscle. And when you dissect the heart in about 2 weeks, you're going to notice that the aorta coming off the heart is really quite muscular. It's sort of like a small garden hose. It's really got some thickness to it. Whereas the vena cava, you're going to say, are you kidding me? That's carrying blood. It's so wimpy. It's like just a flappy thing. There's very little muscle structure at all in a vein. But remember, veins aren't under a lot of pressure, so they don't need that muscular wall. Number 2 or 3 here. The lumen of an artery is more narrow. So inside, and you'll see a picture in a moment, inside an artery has a smaller space. Well, that smaller space is because you have a thick layer of muscle, and that smaller space helps to keep the pressure high, right? You want to increase the pressure going through a hose, squeeze on it, right? And if you squeeze it, then the lumen, the opening is smaller, and it will increase the pressure. So we want nice, small, tight lumen in arteries, whereas veins, much bigger. In fact, veins tend to spread. They tend to spider out. They tend to become varicose veins. They can be full of fluid and full of blood and kind of spread outside their normal place and then make lovely decorations on our legs, right? So varicose veins tend to spread. Arteries, deeper, they're not going to spread because of that thick muscle. Lastly, capillaries don't have 3 layers. Capillaries only have 1 layer. They're very, very delicate. And the only layer that capillaries have is the endothelium, the simple squamous layer on the inside. Just enough basement membrane to glue them together. What happens in capillaries, folks? Gas exchange. Where else do we have gas exchange? In the alveoli, in the air sacs. What kind of epithelium is found in both? Simple squamous, right? So it starts to all make sense. This histology thing starts to make sense. So we have simple squamous epithelium wherever there is gas exchange, in the alveoli of the lung and in the capillaries where gas exchange is happening. Very, very delicate, very, very thin. Here's a nice little picture, kind of puts it all into perspective. On the right, here's your artery. On the left, the vein. I said that backwards, but you know what I mean, right? Left artery, right vein. Notice they both have the same tunica intima. Hard to see, but that's just that thin inner layer. We would call that the endothelium. That's a simple squamous epithelium. They both have a tunica media, but man, look how meaty the artery is, right? It's a really thick muscular layer, whereas the wimpy vein. And then the tunica externa, it's shown better here on the vein side. The vein is a little bit thicker. And do you see all those little arteries and veins in there? Those are, quote, that series of arteries and veins are the vasa vasorum, the little vessels of the big vessel. So we need to have oxygen even going to the fibroblasts and the cells, the muscle cells, making up the bigger vessels. One thing this shows that I haven't discussed yet is that some of your larger veins, especially in your leg, have valves. These valves are going to make sure that blood only moves in one direction and that it can't backflow. Remember I told you that veins are under very low pressure. So gravity would win if it weren't for these valves keeping blood moving back to the heart. We'll talk more about that in a second. Lastly, here we see a capillary bed. So blood is coming down the artery and going into a capillary bed. You see the red become blue. Oxygen's dropped off. CO2 is picked up, waste products, and then that blue blood from the capillary is going to drain back into a vein and come back toward the heart. Lastly, this picture shows us that the capillary is very delicate in comparison and is only composed of that 1 layer, the endothelial layer of the tunica intima. Okay, so that's a nice little visual connection of all this stuff. I think everything I'm about to tell you now is kind of, you can read through it very easily. It mentions to you, question, true or false? Arteries always go away from the heart. True. Arteries are always red. False, right? And we've seen 2 exceptions. We've seen the pulmonary arteries are blue. The other exception in your lifetime, umbilical. Remember the umbilical, as a fetus, your umbilical artery was going away from your heart carrying blue blood. And your umbilical vein was coming in carrying red blood from mama. So we've seen there's two places in our body at some point in our life where we've had blue and red flipping. So not always true, right? Arteries are not always red. 3 kinds of arteries. You'll hear this more in lecture, but the largest arteries, like your aorta and your pulmonary trunk, would be considered elastic. Why? Because they have a lot of elastin in them. They stretch a lot. Every time blood leaves your heart, the aorta is going to, it's going to pulse a little bit. It's going to stretch. The medium-sized arteries in your body, they are called the muscular arteries, and these are the ones we're naming. So the femoral artery, the common iliac, the brachial artery, we would refer to those more as muscular arteries. And then the smallest of arteries are actually little structures called arterioles. We won't be naming or labeling any arterioles. These are microscopic arteries. And these arterioles then bring the blood to the capillaries. Okay. As you get smaller and smaller, the diameter of the artery gets smaller and smaller, but the muscle layer actually stays really strong because, again, this is where all the control comes. Right? All the ability for you to regulate your blood flow through your body comes from the muscle layer of your arteries. I'm not going to hold you responsible for histology this semester, but the middle picture is a nice artery. What's that inside layer called? The tunica intima, right? Just this simple squamous. The pink layer, that's the muscle. That'd be the tunica media. And the blue layer around it would be the tunica externa. Perfect, right? Just to get a visual. Capillaries, again, where gas exchange occurs, really, really small. Only 8 to 10 microns thick. Our red blood cell is 7.5 microns across. Remember, red blood cell is kind of biconcave. It's a pretty tight squeeze. It's pretty claustrophobic for little red blood cells to get through capillaries. So I think it's very difficult to imagine things that small. Just like I have trouble imagining astronomy class, big things, right? I have a hard time sometimes imagining just how small red blood cells are and how microscopic these little capillaries are. But got to have them, right? Got to have them for the gas exchange. And then what we see here is just a picture, cartoon. Here's blood coming through a small arteriole. See the muscle layer, that's the tunica media. Comes down into a capillary bed. Again, we see the color change going from red to blue. Comes out and goes down a small vein. Seen it, just kind of giving you another view of it. As the blood comes back, it returns through all these veins. I've already told you how wimpy they are. They have a big lumen, a wimpy muscle. True or false? Veins always come back toward the heart. True. Veins always carry blue blood. False, right? Again, the pulmonary and umbilical stories flip that. Now, I've already told you that the blood pressure is very, very low in a vein. So let's think about something for a second. I'm going to skip over a couple things here. But how in the world does blood get back to the heart? I've told you that the aorta is pumping blood out in high pressure, going to your brain and your big toe. And I'm telling you that the veins have very little pressure as it comes back. So there are 3 things that keep blood coming back to your heart. Number 1, the valves do help, right? As blood gets to a certain point, it can't go back. So the valves certainly help. What else? Pumps do more than push. Pumps also suck, right? So if you think about it, the heart is pushing blood out under high pressure, but that means that the heart is also sucking back, if you will. Okay, so that sucking back is bringing a lot of it back to the heart. Then finally, every time you walk, every time you contract your muscles, you are squeezing some of the deeper veins in your legs and arms for sure. Every time you breathe, your diaphragm is squeezing veins traveling through your chest. So as you walk, as you squeeze those muscles, it's also pushing blood back, and then it gets up to a certain level and it can't go back because of the valve, and then the heart is sucking, and so collectively blood comes back to the heart. So what does that suggest? What should we tell everybody to maintain a good, healthy heart? You should exercise, move, keep, even just walking is good for your heart. And if you don't walk, if you're rather sedentary, what is it doing to your heart? Making it work harder, right? It's having to suck harder. You're not moving your muscles. The heart is therefore having to suck harder. Now, what happens to a muscle that works harder? It gets bigger, right? If I work my muscles, they're going to get bigger. That's good for my biceps. That's not a good thing for your heart. You want your heart to be a small, efficient machine. And if your heart has to work too hard because of a lack of exercise and having to suck too hard, over 20 or 30 years, the heart starts to get bigger. Now, the last thing you want to hear about is that you have an enlarged heart. An enlarged heart, that sounds good, but no, an enlarged heart is less efficient. It's not working as well, and you now have some significant heart disease. Okay, and once you build the muscle up, you can't get it back down. So with our aging, our heart will get a little bit bigger, but we can certainly slow down that process by maintaining an active lifestyle, keeping our muscles moving, and make our heart work less hard.
So what about the people that already have a large heart and are athletes but have been dying?
Right, so that's exactly it. They have a genetic defect, something about their heart. It's an enlarged heart. And we hear about these people, and they're dropping dead, on the field. They're young or middle-aged, way too young. So what's happened? They're exercising, right? And they're doing their normal thing, and their heart up until that point has obviously been okay. But it's an enlarged heart, and it can no longer handle working as hard. Again, you want a tight, efficient heart. And when it gets bigger, it can't work as efficiently. These young people, if they were an older person with an enlarged heart, they're not as active. But a young person with an enlarged heart, that combination, the heart can't keep up, right? And it can be a fatal situation. So typically, if you go in, now they're doing heart screenings. They're doing quick screenings, and if you are one of those 1 in 1,000 kids who has an enlarged heart, they may say to you, you really shouldn't or you can't or whatever play sports where your heart rate's going to go way up. Bowling's still on the list. Archery, there are things for you to do, but it's not going to be highly athletic, right?
Sometimes do heart transplants for something like
They're not going to do a heart transplant for that, I don't think. I shouldn't say no. But they possibly could, right? If it was really a dysfunctional heart, they might have to consider a heart transplant. But that is still relatively risky, right? I'm just guessing, I would think your heart would have to be in very bad shape to be considering a heart transplant, because that's a risky situation in itself as well. So that's really all I want to share with you about the heart. And I've already mentioned the valves and how your muscles are working. This slide gives you a nice little visual overview of arteries versus veins. I've already shown you a picture like it. Here's where I'm going to just give you one slide of information, and then you're going to start looking at the models. So if you would, turn to page, I want to say somewhere around 423. It's 423, a red man, a man with arteries. Yeah. And then if you go over about 5 pages to 428, you'll see what I call blue man. So you got red man and blue man, okay? Let's take a look at red man on page 423. This is arteries. And let's figure this out. Does everyone have a heart in front of them? If you don't, grab one, please. Okay, grab a heart. Every table, grab a heart. Or two, okay? And let's think about this for a second. So what my slide tells you is this. Blood is going to leave the heart. We know it leaves out the aorta. It's leaving from the left ventricle. It's going up through the aortic semilunar valve. We know this. And goes up into the aorta. Look at your heart model. To see this best, open up that little right auricle window. And what you're going to notice is that coming off from the aorta, you'll see this artery coming off, feeding the heart muscle. That is the coronary artery. Do you see it? There's another one as well. There's two. There's a left and a right coronary artery. But as soon as blood is coming up out of the aorta, you're going to see a branch. And that branch is going to be feeding the heart muscle. You see one side better than the other on this model. Okay? So as the blood comes up out of the aorta, you see a branch coming off. There's another one on the other side. So what my slide is telling you is that as you begin to go up the ascending aorta, the upward portion, the first branch off from the ascending aorta are the left and right coronary arteries. The blood then continues up into the aortic arch. And at the top of the arch, you see 3 main branches. Those branches, it makes sense, I think, are going to be sending blood to things above the heart. They're going to be sending blood to the brain and to the arms. Okay? Now, the first branch is the brachiocephalic branch, or the brachiocephalic trunk. What does that word mean to you? Brachio? Brachium? Arm? Cephalic? Cephal? Head. So this is going to be carrying blood to the arm and the head. And if you look at your heart, that first branch is more on the right side of the body. That brachiocephalic trunk is going to, in just a moment, split, and part of it's going to go right up the right side of the neck, called the right common carotid. Everybody see this on their picture? And our branch is going to go over to the right arm. It's going to first go underneath the clavicle, so it's called the subclavian artery, and it's heading toward the arm. The second branch coming off the top of the aortic arch, the middle one, is going to go straight up the left side of the neck. That is the left common carotid. Now look what happens to that common carotid up by the head. You see it split? There's an internal and an external. That's as far as we're going to go. We're not going to go into the brain in this class. We're just going to get the blood up to the brain on the outside, internal and external carotid, and that's where our story will stop for this semester. Then the third branch of the aortic arch is the left subclavian. It's carrying blood over to the left arm. Isn't that cool? I mean, we know our heart is asymmetric, but wouldn't you honestly expect either 2 or 4? And here we have 3. There's an asymmetry to our heart, and it shows up again here as we look at this and we say, you know what, there's not 3 branches. There's not 2 or 4, there's 3. We think of our body as being very symmetric, but the more you learn about our anatomy, the more that you'll realize our left and right brain aren't the same, our left and right lungs aren't the same, our left and right heart aren't the same, right? And so there's a lot of things. Our kidneys are not exactly the same. There's a lot of things about us that are not balanced, okay? Now, once you come around the aortic arch and you start coming down, some books will call that the descending aorta. That's correct. Other books will call it the thoracic aorta because you're still up in the thorax. Once the aorta splits down through the abdominal pelvic cavity, goes past the diaphragm, some books will call that the abdominal aorta. Regardless, it's still the aorta. Along the way, what do you see? Little branches going out to the kidneys, going out to the liver, and then right about the umbilicus, what happens to the aorta? It makes a big split. It bifurcates. It's going to go to the right and left common iliac. Okay, iliac. We know that term. Ilium, iliac region. Right? So it makes sense to us. No new word here. And then what happens to the common iliac? Whenever you hear the word common artery, you know it's going to split. So the common iliac splits. There's a little inward turn. Internal iliac is going to your reproductive and pelvic organs, and then the majority of the common iliac continues on the outside as the external iliac. As long as it's next to the ilium, it's called the iliac. But then what happens to the external iliac once it breaks through the pelvis and goes along the leg? It changes its name to the femoral. Arteries are like streets going through town. It's the same road, but it keeps changing names as you go through different neighborhoods. So the external iliac is the external iliac as long as we're in the ilium, in the iliac region, and then once we go, across the bridge and we leave the pelvis, now we are along the femur, so we change it to the femoral artery. And that's about as far as we go. We're only going to go down to about the knee. Now, you've got 2 ways of doing this. In your pre-lab instructions, you were told to cross off arteries and veins from the 2 model inventory lists. Or, on the back of your pre-lab, you were given a list of arteries and veins to know. I don't care which way you go about this, crossing things off or just keeping certain arteries or veins. But the ones on the back of your pre-lab are the only ones you need to be able to identify. For this, you have your blue man, red man image. Start there. Once you have looked at your blue man and red man and made sense of it, Then you're going to walk around the room. And in the room, we have about 4 different models. We've got 2 soem-so models, the 2 half-size soem-sos. We've taken out their organs, and you can see arteries and veins here. There's another one on the back table. There are 2 or 3 around the room, 2 or 3 flat Stanley models. Okay, they show arteries and veins. Then over here, there's 3 other larger bust models, and they also show things. This one does a really nice job. This Denoyer-Gebhardt model does a really nice job, very clearly showing arteries and veins. No one model shows everything. You've learned that. So you definitely want to do a little tour around the room as individuals or as groups and just confirm, move it around, and make sure you know everything. Next week, the quiz will include not only identifying arteries and veins on a picture, but also going over to a model and identifying arteries and veins on models. So that'll be your quiz next week, along with knowing your lymphatic organs. I've done a lot of talking, I know. What I'm going to do is give you about 25 minutes, okay, to look at the structures. It's kind of repetitive. You got like 5 different models to look at. It's the same thing over and over. And then the last 20 minutes or so, we'll do blood typing. And you'll actually get the chance to do blood typing. That is a voluntary thing, but you'll have the opportunity, and most students have been opting to do it. I think it's kind of cool, and it's a good way of confirming your understanding. So that's the rest of our day. I'll shut this off. And if you have any questions, anything about vessels right now, what you need to learn? Beautiful. Very good.